Hello,
Great.
welcome.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Question Answer.
So this is a continuation of the last community-wide um, case study that we had with Kari Gleiser, and there were a bunch of questions that people had that we could not answer all at that time, and so we're just going to go through them now, and I think there are 14 questions, I believe. So, and Kari, I think since a lot of these are related to the case study that you presented, how about I just read them out loud to you, and then you can start, and I'll just jump in where it's appropriate. Okay. All right. Um, Okay, so this is from part one. So that one was a little bit more on the theory side. Um, all right, so this one is from Samuel Shin. What is the difference between solo medicine journeys and relational medicine journeys with a therapist within the context of healing trauma? Asking as a transpersonal relational therapist who appreciates the depth of relational processing in PSIP and as someone who's considering using psychedelics towards my own healing for the first time.
All right, this is one I'd love to just dance with together because I feel like you also have a lot of response to answer here and a lot of perspective. But I would just start out by saying that I think both can be healing experiences and both can be deep healing experiences. But specifically, if you're looking to do healing work with attachment trauma or relational trauma, the cure needs to have elements of the, right? Like the trauma was relational and the healing has to be relational. And it's really hard to have something be relational if you're by yourself. And AEDP, I mean, certainly you can feel connected inside, you can feel connected to parts, you can feel connected to your inner healer, you can even feel connected to the medicine, and that can be incredibly powerful. But that still seems different to me than an attachment relationship with an actual external human being. And I think there's so much value to that, and that it's really, that piece is irreplaceable. But maybe some people need to build up to that. Maybe they need to build certain resources and connections inside before they feel ready to trust in that way or to open to trust. And I would even say you don't have to trust to start that process. You can come in not trusting and full
Mhm.
of all kinds of fears, and those can be the material. If you're working with someone who's competent, who's attachment informed, and who's attuned and can go anywhere you need to go, really how you work with those fears initially can be a huge part of the process. So not feeling like, oh, I need to get over those fears first, and then I can undertake that relationship work or that relational work. But no, that can be really part of the process held together.
Yeah, the distrust can be the access point.
Yes, that's a beautiful, succinct way of putting
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I was going to go exactly. Your answer is very close to my answer that, maybe the only thing I would add is that, I'd say for, again, the mental health population, the vast majority of things that I think cause people to enter into therapy and stay in therapy are relational wounds, right? It's things that it happened to us, particularly in childhood, particularly in your family of origin. And if the wounds didn't happen there and that was a pretty stable, good experience for people, then we find that people have a lot of resilience, right? So they're going into life with a lot of foundation that if they do have further traumas in life, they fall back onto that foundation. So yeah, I mean, I think especially again for the mental health population, these are probably people that have tried other pathways, and they're probably not coming to psychedelics as a first line approach to therapy. So they probably encounter some treatment resistance along the way, which probably means, deep relational wounds and that are very heavily defended by things like dissociation. So
Someone just gave you a thumbs down. Did you see that?
that may
I
have
did
been
not
me.
like that part. That was so funny.
How does that
I
happen?
don't know. I mean, maybe it's ghosts or something.
I feel
I
like
liked what you said, so
you
that was
like what I
not
said.
a thumbs down statement. AI has some defenses it needs to work through.
The AI needs to be mothered, it needs to be nurtured
Yes.
here, right?
AI needs to be brought into attachment.
Yeah, yeah. So, human relational wounding requires human relational healing. And I think without that, you're going into it and you're maybe looking for the transpersonal for that to some degree. And I think the transpersonal can play that role to some degree, right? You can have these corrective experiences with the world as an intelligent, warm, responsive, attuned place. But still, I think that's the transpersonal realm where you're experiencing that kind of intelligence and that kind of warmth. It's possible to experience that in the human realm, right?
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
we don't need to give up on the human realm.
Exactly. We're living for this moment in human bodies in the human world. So it would feel tragic to me if someone like discounted the possibility, right, of that ever happening. And remember, a lot of people make the decision to come into a relational psychedelic assisted psychotherapy session in a normal state of consciousness, right? So you're making that decision based on all the fears, all the challenges with trust, and it's gonna feel different when you're on the medicine, right? Stuff's not gonna go away, but that's part of why psychedelics are so helpful in healing trauma, because they can just bring those defenses down a little bit, depending on the medicine that you're working with, of course. But there can be an opening, there can be new access that's not there in a normal state of consciousness. So also I would say trust the altered state of consciousness a little bit, trust that it will feel new and different. And that's part of why I think people are pursuing this as sometimes as a last ditch effort, or when other things have failed, or their struggles are treatment resistant, because like it's just give me some hope here, give me another state of mind in which to approach this. And so there is help that the medicine gives.
Great, yeah, a great deal of help with it the medicine gives, and uh, puts you in contact with resources and fluidity that your ordinary conscious doesn't have access to. And just piggybacking off of this a little bit, Carrie, just the thing that you said that or we've been talking about that psychedelics as a kind of a last line for many people. I
Mhm.
think that's going to change, right? I think as these medicines enter into our culture and into mental health, I think this idea that we have that, that non-rational, unconscious, like direct experience, felt sense that, you can't understand with your mind, you can't articulate into language, we kind of discount that to some degree in mental health at this point. And I think what we're being pointed to here with this revolution in mental health with psychedelics is this whole idea that no, we're looking to the irrational. We're looking to these dark places in our psyches that, they're not linear. They don't work on the same principles that your mind normally works on. But for healing, they seem to be much more powerful places for us.
Totally. And I would even say not just in the mental health field, but really in Western culture in
Mm.
general, right? That rationality, analytic, autonomy, like these are some of the kind of values that have, I think, run amok a little bit, and this idea of we can put some of that aside and there are other domains to explore. Not that we need to throw all that out, but just let's shift a little. And I really do think psychedelics values this other territory, right? That is darker, that is more shadowy, that is less rational, that is more, amorphous or more feelingful or more heart-centered. And, it's my personal bias and I'm owning it, that we need to bring those values into society at large. And there really does need to be a cultural shift that's more inclusive. Again, not either or, not divided up, but complementary.
Mhm. Fully on board with that. Yeah.
Oh
Can you imagine if our morality came from that
my gosh.
place, right? That place of greater empathy, that sensitivity to life that can happen there. And just, we base our rules on how we relate as countries, as people. It's based on that experience rather than sort of mind. So
Yes. Interconnectivity instead of separateness and competition, and like what a difference that would make. Huge.
yeah. I don't think we're going to be fast through these.
I know. Not the wonderful nonlinear path that answer took. Like, we might get through 3 questions, but
We might get,
great.
we're going to have a part 2 for our question. Okay, all right. All right, reeling it back in. All right, so this is from Dale Trimble. Hi, Dale. So based on the PSIP tapes I've seen and my own experience with PSIP medicine work, there is still undoing aloneness, but the focus is being with the dissociation. For example, in the last time the therapist working with Saj held his hand while he went into the distress in his body that has been dissociated. What? I didn't read that well.
Yeah, no, I think that wasn't a complete sentence. He was just saying,
Oh,
for
okay.
example, that was an instance, right, where
Okay.
the therapist kind of helped you move into the realm of dissociation, but she was there, right? And that's undoing aloneness.
Yeah.
So I actually think this is one we could answer quickly,
Okay.
because profound attunement is undoing aloneness, right? It's saying, I'll go there with you. Like, that's profound. And when you say, I'll go there with you to the dark places, to the dissociative places, I'll go there where everyone else has tried to rein you back in and pull you to them, instead of them going to you, to these like outer outposts of dissociation. That's totally undoing aloneness in some of the loneliest parts of the psyche. So absolutely, I think PSIP undoes aloneness.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Let me see something. Oh, sorry. I jumped to. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think yeah, the focus in PSIP is on is on the darkness, because I think so much of us lives there, and particularly under this what I would call a primary consciousness defense, a biological defense of dissociation, right? And again, it's one of those things that we know about. Van der Kolk talks about it, and yet as a field, I think we pull away from it. We don't fully work into it, and that is to some degree saying, that yeah, this part of you that lives there, that perhaps with the worst things that have ever happened to you, we can't be in relationship with that. And so yeah, so when we head towards dissociation, we head towards undoing the aloneness. Absolutely.
Because a lot of the darkness lives under the dissociation, right?
Mhm.
And for someone to talk about what lives there beyond under dissociation is not really being in the experience of it. Like, you can talk about something and undo aloneness on that level, right? Oh, you know that about me now. Or you can completely be in that experience in an embodied, pain saturated or shame saturated or, distressful way, and having someone be with you while you're in it. That's a different dimension of undoing aloneness. And I think that exists really in both models. I think what has felt revolutionary to me about PSIP, that I think now is kind of in my AEDP work is even stretching, is like, okay, if we can be with the dissociation, be with that layer that's also holding more darkness underneath it, right? We're just stretching out further and further and further. Dissociation isn't something to be necessarily reined in so we can do the work, right? We have to go out there to it, and there's a lot lurking underneath it, right? Once it clears a little, so much more stuff comes into the room and into the body.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, great. Great. Okay, so this is from Michelle Strandberg. Saj pondered during my in-person if my anxiety could possibly have been developed as a coping mechanism. So that feels like a place where PSIP may overlap with AEDP. AEDP view Kari just described of anxiety as being a defense for avoiding something deeper we are even more afraid of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll bring in a little tiny bit of AEDP theory where we use the Malin's triangle of experience. So if you imagine an upside down triangle, right? We say defense is at one side of the top of the triangle and anxiety is at the other side. and experience is at the bottom, right?
Mhm.
So emotion, sensation, relational experience, as long as it's alive, it's at the bottom of the triangle. And so defense and anxiety are kind of like the two outposts up there. Like we
Mm.
hang out in our defenses to protect against experience that we think is going to kill us or make us come undone or we're just terrified of. And when you start chipping away at people's defenses or trying to get around them and trying to get them down to experience, what happens? They get anxious.
Mhm.
They're like, wait, you're taking my protections away, or not, you're taking them away. You're seeing through them, or you're encouraging me to let go of them, or whatever kind of defense work you're doing. They feel the potential of moving towards something they've been avoiding for a long time. So
Mhm.
anxiety and defense have this very close relationship to each other. And
Mm.
typically when you see one go down, you see the other one go up. So they're kind of inversely related to each other.
Mhm.
But the anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's like showing that, okay,
Yeah.
we're getting closer to something that is real, that's under there, that needs feeling, that needs witnessing, that needs experiencing.
Yep, yep. I would say that my articulation of that is, we find people that are comfortable, find comfort in certain either sympathetically aroused states where, it's full of anxiety and maybe like other difficult emotions like fear, but it's also kind of a active defense state, right? Meaning that people can be sort of more empowered in dealing with the anxiety. And what they're really looking to stay away from is hopelessness or collapse, powerlessness, right? So sometimes, and sometimes the reverse, right? Sometimes people are far more comfortable in more dissociative, numb states rather than feeling anxiety. That's the main thing they're trying to stay away from. So I guess in the PSIP model, we're just saying like, okay, what is trying to come up and where is the client's secondary consciousness diverting them to maybe just out of pure habit, right? So
Exactly.
yeah. It-
Exactly. And some people can even get attached. I mean, some people really suffer and feel oppressed by their anxiety, and some people can actually be attached to their anxiety. Like
That's it.
my
Yeah.
anxiety that's keeping me functional. Like my anxiety is one of my protectors. It like keeps me mobilized. It keeps me on top of things. And I think that kind of anxiety in some ways is even harder to work with because it's so
Hmm.
egosyntonic. Like I need it. It's like one of my tools.
Hmm. Yeah. It's how we navigate the world, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And if I let that down, I might just be vulnerable, or I might just be sad, or maybe I'll be powerful beyond belief, right? Like there can
Mhm.
be all sorts of things down there in experience that people are not letting themselves feel. Sometimes it's collapse and numbness, but sometimes it's like the good stuff too.
Mhm. Isn't that amazing how good stuff can be threatening to people? Like,
All
yeah.
gets scripted that way through those caregiver child interactions, right?
Mhm.
Whatever the caregiver had to split off or couldn't take, that child learns,
Mhm.
better not feel that, better not bring this into relationship.
It reminds me of some things that I've seen where people are working attachment. Let's say somebody has avoidant attachment and they've got sort of all of those mechanisms in place, and so their system's finally working through that. They see sort of the dilemma. They see the dark side of being so avoidant, and that underneath it there's this incredible impulse to reach out. And so sometimes I've seen when people even just begin that little bit of reaching out, they go into waves. Like there's something so terrifying to them about actually just beginning this movement because they've wanted it so much and so much went into covering up that response for people. Yeah. Yeah.
That so fits the neurobiology studies and the neuroimaging studies of people with avoidant attachment, where
Mhm.
they look, where if you do heart rate measures and kind of stress sensitivity measures, people that are avoidant will often look completely unperturbed, but their nervous system is going wild underneath that, right?
Uh-huh.
They have just as elevated heart rates or just as elevated stress
Uh-huh.
cortisol levels as someone who is like in active distress. So the neurobiology is all still there. And probably what you're doing is you're getting pushing through of that, right? You're working with enough lowering of the defense that then the activation can come, the true activation that's in there can come up.
Wow. Yeah, so that's basically saying that underneath the calm dissociation, there's tons of activation still going on.
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Let's move on. This is from Adam Saunders. This conversation about the comparative states has been so helpful for me. I've been working through so much core aloneness. My last sessions have been alternating waves of grief, then feeling touched by the therapist being there for me. These deeply relational affects left me confused as to how to map this onto the PSIP threat response model. But maybe we need a second parallel map where PSIP state 4 dissociation is connected to absolute aloneness, and state 2 has a wider range of relational affect, negative to anger, rage, grief, as well as positive corrective. And PSIP state 0 is more secure attachment. Not sure, but there was something missing for me in the PSIP threat response model, though very informative.
That reminds me of a comment that you made once. I can't remember if it was during the first community study or if it was during just a private conversation between us where you're like, maybe state 0 isn't just like the kind of the calm after the storm, and maybe there's like more in that to kind of like break open. And I know when I did my part A with you, I don't know if you remember that, the state that I went into that was definitely not just state 0. It was like, it really felt like a total spiritual experience, right? So I think that there's a way that that question is getting at like, okay, maybe there's like a state -1 or something. Like a descriptive, like something more. Like it's not just that the nervous system has released something and gone down to calm, but maybe there's more to break open there in that calm that's happening.
Do you mean more to break open? That could be very much more on the positive side of
Yeah.
uh,
Experiencing and like the solution that comes on board, I think is very nuanced. The relational, the emotional, the spiritual, like there's so much richness in that. And that's, to go back to the theory piece of like pieces that hang off on the PSIP side and pieces that hang off on the AEDP side. I think that's a piece that hangs off on the AEDP side. Like we've gotten really good at mapping all that like rich, positive, juicy, not just resourcing, not just solution. It's really reworking inner templates, right? Of attachment. That's the alternating waves of grief, right? You can feel so alone. You can go to the outer reaches of state 4. And when someone meets you there in an attuned way, you cannot just resolve the dissociation, but you can feel so much gratitude, so much love, so much grief that you never had that, right? Like those are other dimensions that maybe aren't so much just nervous system processes, but they're part of like that richness of being human that's also emotional and relational. And so I think Adam is kind of advocating for like a more extensive map.
Yeah, let's build out the map a bit more.
Build out the map.
Yeah, it's almost like saying, once the trauma pieces are gone, so much more can open up, so much more can actually happen in that space. That's just much more than neutral or just like, okay,
Yes.
good here, right? Like, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not just, taking your hand off of a hot, stove. Well, that's not a great metaphor because it's still going to hurt a lot. It's not just like, removing pain. It's like bringing in this whole world of connectivity, of pleasure, of acceptance, of wisdom, of like, there's just so many qualities that
Yeah.
get captured in AEDP's transformational experience state. I give a whole presentation on how AEDP state 3, not PSIP state 3, AEDP state 3. That's like the positive state. That's the good stuff that comes after a state 2 wave. Is kind of like a mystical experience, right? If you read like William James and like the mystics of different religions and really just like this burst of mysticism that happened in the early 1900s, they'll talk about like feeling like the psyche gets blown open, right? In ways that can feel both kind of scary and a little tremulous and even a kind of terrifying, but in a positive way. Like, oh my God, I'm seeing so much. I feel so much that I didn't feel before. And what
Mhm.
is this? And who am I? And things are shifting. The sands are shifting beneath my feet in good ways, but it
Mhm.
feels weird and kind of crazy. And right, that it's just this really compact moment of quantum change, like not gradual change, like change happening all at once. And how the nervous system responds to that can look a lot like what people call mystical experiences.
Interesting. Would you say that's sort of organically moving from, say,
Yes.
trauma and body into transpersonal? Is that
Um,
or-
so we haven't languaged it like that in AEDP. I've stretched a little bit because I think Diana Fosha, who created AEDP, has always been a little cautious about bringing spirituality into a healing trauma and healing psyche model. I think she's always wanted it to, but there's been some definitely movement there. And she's like really let me talk about mysticism and spirituality. And if you look at what happens on psychedelics and what people report when they're long-term meditators or they develop a compassion practice, and you look at what happens in an ADP session after someone releases long pent-up grief or rage they didn't even know that they had in them, the phenomenology is there and it's just organic. And
Mhm.
I love that because it doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter if you're religious or not, or spiritual or not. It's the experience that's coming out of your body, right? In the wake of healing from something,
Mhm.
right? And so, how miraculous is that? How amazing is that? Like, it's
Interesting.
just biological.
I think this is something different from what, I'll just speak to this on a personal level,
Yeah, yeah, please.
because I don't know if this
That's
is
where it
the
gets
thing,
interesting.
but yeah. So I recall in my personal work when there came a period where I'm open about this. So I've had these 28 full day well held psychedelic experiences, and then it's only when I got to cannabis that it really opened up sort of the dissociation that was holding the core of my trauma. And so part of that work was really just continuing to clear dissociation so I could really see what was down there. Then part of it was just going through the waves of terror around what was down there. And then the latter parts of it, and I would say that all of this from beginning to end took about like 9 sessions, right? And so the last 3 of those sessions were with ketamine or ketamine cannabis combination, which that's my favorite medicine at this point.
Mhm.
And but it wasn't doing waves. It was just this incredible like regression and this positive redo of like all the developmental things, all the developmental tasks that I would have done as an infant if the trauma wasn't there. So this was, I mean, it was, there were no words to it, there were no thoughts to it. It was just like reaching out and then finding her there, finding mom there, making the contact and just like feeling like my whole system being like reorganized from those types of experiences, and that only could be there after those terror waves move through, right? So is
Totally.
that kind of what you're describing, Carrie, or is it?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of what I'm describing. And here's what I wonder. If you had been in an ADP session in those,
Mhm.
like just do a little thought experiment
Yeah.
here, right? So you did all those reparative attachment, right? And
Mhm.
then reparative attachment done, end of session, except it's not the end of session. Then there's a whole nother half hour or a whole nother hour,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
like, now what's that like in your body? What's it like that you've waited your whole life to have somebody there to reach for?
Mhm.
It brings tears to my eyes just saying
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And now it's there. And now you've done it. So now be in that experience of the transformation, because
Mhm.
that opens up a whole other spiral when you hold somebody in the transformation that is currently happening or that has just happened. It's a whole nother dimension of experience that I think is deepening of the transformation. And it's no longer about nervous system healing. It's about growing new dendrites and growing new neural connections and growing, like really like a root accelerant, like things stretch out because you're paying attention to them and you're
Yeah.
watering them with your attention, your the dyadic attention.
Yeah, that's fantastic because in PSIP we say a lot that like we've got a magnifying glass, and whatever you put the magnifying glass
Yes.
of awareness over tends to evolve, tends to move, right? And so we put it over the places of great compromise in the system. And what I hear you saying is, great, take that magnifying glass and then put it over these new roots that have been forming once the trauma cleared, and have those grow as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right. All
And the
right.
incredible intimacy and vulnerability on both sides, right? Because the therapist also has to really own that they're part of a transformational process that is unfolding moment to moment. And someone might, I don't know if you remember this, but after I had my big experience, I just kept saying, Saj, I love you. I love the work that you're doing. Right? I just went into a total
Yeah.
gratitude and love like explosion,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm.
I don't know how that was for you, but like we do that in AEDP.
Yeah.
You might have been like, whoa, this is intense.
I
What is she
know.
doing?
I
But
think,
it
yeah.
was totally just right. That was the flow of like, it was almost a mystical state that I was in. And it was
Mhm,
just
mhm.
pouring out of me.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
have that be again held by the dyad and like feel that deep, like, what is that like that we can both be in this together?
Yeah.
It's like
No,
the
Carrie, I
light.
totally get what you're saying, because it's really important that both are in it together, because it's not just that you went through hell together. Now let's do what families do and actually celebrate like being here together, right? In a really good way. So it's like, yeah, you don't need to end the attunement when the good stuff shows up, in other words, right?
And that's consistent because when like Tronic and
Mhm.
BB and all those great like early childhood developmental attachment researchers looked at thousands of attachment dyads, what they found was that with the securely attached mother baby dyads, they spent most of their time in positive affect.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Right? Like they weren't afraid of negative affect. When bad stuff happened, they would go there and they would hold it and they would repair it, or they would, soothe or comfort or whatever. But
Mhm.
most of their interactions were based on positive affect. So we can't neglect that finding, because it means like we gotta help people build the neurocircuitry
Mhm.
for mutually experienced positive affect states.
Relational
Yeah.
positive affect states. Yeah, yeah. I'm on
Yeah.
board. I'm on board. Love it.
Yay.
I love it. So I feel like when we've talked, it does alter my practice of PSIP, because I feel like the more I build out that positive in my side, the more I can bring that to the relational aspects as solution pieces.
Exactly. And then the more you can do the darkness, right?
Yeah,
Like they really
exactly.
are. I love the yin yang symbol because it's the light and the darkness, and there's a little bit of light in the darkness and a little bit of darkness in the light, and they're in complete interconnected relationship with each other. And I think that's just that says it all.
Mhm.
When you're feeding the light, you're also building the courage to go to the darkness. And
Yeah.
they're not they're inextricable
Hmm.
each
Hmm.
other. Mhm.
Whew, okay.
Cool. I know. These are great. They're just amazing discussions. And I think we might do a part two. I mean, I can go a little longer if you can, but I
Let's see. Let me check my schedule for today. Yeah, I got time. So let's get as much of these done as we can, and if we need to, we'll do. Okay. This is from Jen. How many so these are more specific to the second part that we could not video record. So unfortunately, if you missed it, you can't go back and see it because of confidentiality issues. And Carrie, how do you feel about talking about that session and having that recorded?
yeah, I feel okay because I can disguise
Okay,
the identifying information and in a way that I don't think anyone would recognize. So
great. Okay, all right. All right, so how many sessions of PSIP did he have before the sessions you showed? With and without medicine, what is the approximate date of this session? What changes has he noticed in his life due to this work?
Yeah, so I will go through them kind of quickly because I think we integrated a little of this discussion in, but just for people that weren't there, I made the kind of semi-embarrassing self-disclosure that this was I had done one PSIP session with him off of medicine, right, and gotten supervision with you, and this was only his second PSIP session, and we went right in with ketamine. And in fact, this was only like, I don't know, I had only had a handful of PSIP sessions under my belt because I had just done part A, and I
You
just
just
like,
complete, I remember, yeah.
I was so excited and felt so drawn and called to the model that I was like, I'm just going to start doing this. And so he had only had the one session without medicine, but you can see he could really kind of go deep and has tremendous inner capacity, almost to kind of go into like a trance state, but not disconnected trance state, like a trance state that leads him deeply, deeply inside.
Yeah.
And so it was a rich PSIP session with no medicine. And then we did this one with the ketamine, and it was late last spring, so about a year ago. And he has had amazing changes, really. I mean, I just did an integration with him. So there's also, the next question is, what's integration like for this session? So because I see him every other week, we tend to do a medicine session and an integration session, and a medicine session and an integration session. But there's always a little bit of integration at the end of our sessions because we call that an AEDP meta processing. So we always do the, what's it been like that we've just done this work together? How is it landing for you? What are you noticing? So it's a little bit of reflective and deepening and being in the transformational experience. So that's kind of built in to even the medicine sessions. So we were doing one of these last week, and he said, I hadn't seen him because I had just been away, and he said, I'm really doing well. Like, I don't have any complaints. Like, life is going great. Like, he just had so much positive to say. And then he said, I was watching a movie the other night and I was kind of sleepy and like, I don't know if I kind of nodded off, but all of a sudden I had this vision, and he goes into like, he was not on any kind of substance, any kind of medicine. He had a really spontaneous healing vision. He said, I could see these like wounded parts of myself actually healing. Like I could feel them healing. He's like, he did this with his hands. He said they were like here, and at the edges, it was all tingly.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, if someone did this in a psychedelic session, we'd be like, yes,
Yeah.
this is awesome. This is amazing. But he was doing this not even on psychedelics.
Mhm.
So I think something in his system is really so open to this work and is so organically changing. And he's getting these capacities to access them in normal states of consciousness, which is what we want from integration. We don't just want people to have
Yeah.
access on the medicine. We want it to start really throwing out filaments into normal consciousness, normal states of consciousness. And he was a little sleepy, and maybe he was a little open, and whatever. His mind started to wander, and it was a movie he'd seen many times. So maybe he wasn't totally focused on the movie, and this just happened. And it was such a beautiful, joyous occasion. And I said, let's pretend we're on medicine right now. Like, right, this was an integration session. Just
Yeah.
go inside and pretend you're on cannabis.
Yeah.
So he went inside. We went into selective inhibition. And he said, I just feel light on me. And then he's like, no, it's not light on me. It's light coming from inside of me. I
Mm.
feel the light pouring out of me, right? This is an integration session, but it's not really an integration session because it's an active medicine, non-medicine session. So the line blurs a little when you're doing this experiential work, right? That
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't think integration is just a cognitive or like checking in to make sure it's going okay. It's actually a continuation of the experiential process that we're helping it more entwine neurologically into the being of the person, as opposed to having it be a separate medicine session.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's really true acceleration of transformation and healing, right? When someone gets those capacities.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like this person has a permeable relationship between his conscious and unconscious minds, and that, especially when there's not so much threat in the unconscious, that, people are more fluid with it and they're more open to it, and they don't have to demonize it. They don't have to control the hell out of it. And yeah.
Here's the beauty. This
Yeah.
is all brand new for him. He didn't come in like,
Yeah.
I have this permeable, like I have these trans, he did manual labor his whole life, right? Like he's not in the mental health field or the psychology field. He wasn't like an artist. He didn't have psychedelic experience. You know what I mean? Like this is all change from this last year. And that's so exciting to me because I mean, I think he has a natural capacity that was latent and we just awakened with this work. I don't think everyone has this capacity. But when you do have someone with this capacity, it's amazing to like really examine the processes because it's like they're in full relief, you know, sharp relief, where we might struggle with someone else to get them to go in, or there's anxiety, or there's static, or something's kind of clouding the picture. But with him, it's all just like clear and kind of blasting. So it's super fun to work with someone like that because it's all in sharp relief. They teach us, right? I mean, we learn from patients like that. We learn what's possible, you know, what someone's capable of, and we hold an enlarged psychic space for what can happen. So I think that's part of the healing ripples, right? We talk about like propagation of trauma waves. There's also propagation of healing waves, and I think that's it. You know?
Wow. Okay. So an enormous amount of movement.
Yeah, enormous amount of
Yeah.
movement.
Okay.
Really.
Okay. This is from Quentin. Hello, I love this. Thank you. I'm curious about the rephrasing of immobility that is not normal. Is this introducing a value judgment on what he is feeling? Is ketamine not typically inducing a feeling of immobility and containment? Can you expand on this, please? Thank you. Also, are you comfortable sharing on the dosage of the ketamine in the session?
Yeah, I'll answer the last one first
Yeah.
because that's it was 100 milligram troche. And he just dissolved it like you do under your tongue for 15 minutes and then spit it out. So that's the easy one. The harder one, I think, this is actually, I think, a really good kind of gritty question because it forces us to be precise about our language, right? And I really was saying, right, mobility is not normal, but not in a way of like what you're feeling isn't normal, but in the sense of like the immobility is an accommodation of the dissociation, right? If we live in a safe place with good enough caregivers, then a nervous system does not normally go to immobility, right? Immobility is an accommodation to life-threatening trauma or sanity-threatening trauma. So in that way, the events are not normal and it forces kind of not normal nervous system accommodations that are actually very normal in the context of trauma. So I think without being wordy with him like that, I was getting at your nervous system had to learn to do this, right? I didn't want to get into mind and explanation. So I appreciate this question because it helps us bring mind and left brain and like fleshing it out. So dissociation is absolutely normal. Immobility is absolutely normal when we're in life threat.
Yeah. Which is ultimately, hopefully, abnormal situations, or we want them to be situations that were done and over with, that we're not living in these states anymore, right? Yeah. You know, the inability to, you know, do pretty basic things that, you know, one wants to do, right? I think that's why I think the client in this case would not consider that like normal, right?
Right, to be sitting in his chair and think, I want to go out and do something. I want to go to a jewelry class, or I want to go to the gym, and feel literally a wave of immobility come across him, right? That he's really struggled with that and was frustrated by that. And
I want to scratch my nose and I and I can't. So yeah, so and then the adaptation that then shows up to say like, no, I don't need to. I don't need any of this, right? That's again normal, but you know,
but
yeah.
having to um, deny basic needs and
Yeah.
basic capacities as part of the formula for survival. But what I really appreciate about this question is I feel like people that have had a lot of relational trauma, which is really all of us. But the more trauma, the more I think we have to be so careful not to be stigmatizing with our language. And I feel like this question is challenging us a little bit about that in a good way, right? Like, let's not be shaming about our language. Let's not be further stigmatizing. And I think that's such an important point. And I
Mhm.
really appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
great. All right, so Jao, I think that's how you say.
If he's
Makes
Portuguese, it's João. It looks
wow.
very
Okay.
Portuguese. João
Yes.
Ferreira.
Wow is Portuguese. Makes me think of the power of regression when it is in service of growth in this way. Can you elaborate on the place for regression and the place for being in touch with the power of being present and touch our power emotional adaptive impulses?
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I don't think so much in terms of regression. I think more in terms of accessing a part that is kind of stuck in a younger place or stuck in a younger time.
Mhm.
Right. And that is kind of the definition of regression, right? But in a way, I think regression is always there within us, right? Because we all have parts and
Parts that
we all
are
have
tenacious.
multiplicity, right? And that these places, these very young, wounded places that hold these experiences that have always been too dangerous to get near, right? They are the places that need healing the most. So I think when you can go there with or without psychedelics, not go there by talking about them from a distance, but really go there accompanied,
Mhm.
you have to be there to heal it, right? You can't heal something that you're not in touch with, that's not really present. You can't heal something with an idea or a thought or even a story or even a narrative, right? I just don't think you can. It's not that you
You're
can't have,
indicting all of Western psychology in in
sorry.
that moment. Like the whole idea that you can't heal something with a thought or an idea is yeah.
There may be lots of people that disagree with that, and lots of people that are offending with that, but that's I think the core of being an experiential therapist, right? Is like this this core ethos that you have to be there and it has to be alive in the body. And the more we can find ways to speed that up and get there, as opposed to just waiting for it to naturally happen. And for some people, it might naturally happen in the first session. For some people, it might never naturally happen,
Mhm.
right? But really, that's a personal bias of mine. I think it's about all about the
Yeah.
experience. It's gotta.
I'm so fully with you, right? That the most powerful healing experiences that I've had are ones that, you there's nothing to write down afterwards. It's just pure flow. You're in it, you're restructuring while in it, and you can talk about it afterwards, you can engage in it afterwards, but it's experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, or stay in the experience of it afterwards and have a
Yes,
transformation
right. You
experience.
know, I'm reminded of that. I think it's a Virginia Satir quote that the client needs an experience, not an explanation, right?
Yes,
It
I
kind
love
of just
that.
nails it.
And some people, when they get the right explanation and it like fits like a puzzle piece in, they can have an experience of that, right? So sometimes explanations can lead to
Lead to
experience.
experience. Yeah, right.
Right. But I still think it's about the experience. And it's not everyone that an explanation, probably actually not most people that the explanation
Yeah.
is going to lead to the experience.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. We're in the home stretch here, Kari. So, okay. This is from Dave. Hi, Kari and Saj. PSIP trainee here with a strong, long-time interest in AEDP. I'm curious about your thoughts regarding the role suggestion might play in medicine sessions. I wonder, especially when working with the dreamy trance realm that ketamine can create in the patient, how affirming or describing statements like, paraphrasing you, your nervous system learned how to contain you may influence the patient.
Mm. I think, I'm so curious to hear what you have to say about the Saj, because you have a lot more medicine
Mm,
session experience than I do, just cumulatively over the years. But my brief response is that yes, absolutely. Like suggestibility is so heightened on these medicines, and we have to be really careful with that. And that's why I think that this kind of real sparseness, but like real attunement and sparseness of PSIP is protective in a way.
Mhm, mhm.
And, I'd be curious to hear your take on that phrase, your nervous system learned how to contain you. I think really, in my mind, I was doing no more than kind of reflecting back the immobility and the containment and kind of just saying, your nervous system did this. But I
Mhm.
remember you at some point had a lovely rephrase that was even a little more pure, a little less suggestible, because I'm still putting a little of my own kind
Uh-huh.
of, not interpretation on it, but my own little slant on it,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I don't know if you remember how you rephrased that was even.
I I don't remember. I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember the details of it. But I would agree with you. I think that people are incredibly suggestible on medicine, especially certain medicines like tryptamines and like ketamine. I mean, people will look at you with like these, oh, they're unguarded, undefended. They'll look at you with these child eyes, right? And anything you say that they will take really deeply, right? They'll take really personally. So yeah, I really caution students to be very careful about what they bring into that space. Um, you know, and I like how you put that piece of, because it stays so close to, felt sense and direct experience, then we're not adding anything. You're not adding interpretation on it. You're not you can do PSIP without adding any spin on it whatsoever. You can
Yeah.
just say like, oh, just okay, the muscles tightening you up and going here, or the sadness is here. You can use the exact same words that clients use, even if
Mm.
like, if it's like a 4-year-old way of articulating something, you can just stay directly with that, because what we're going for is the fidelity of how this lives in the client system, right?
Staying so attuned and so close to the emergent experience, right? And I would love to have a conversation with you. I think it's too big today, but I
Yeah.
would love to have a conversation with you about, do you see a time to not be that attuned, right? Like, do you see a
You
time
need
to
to add something.
break from that and add something that
Absolutely.
capitalizes on the
Yeah.
neuroplasticity, right? And that was a third session that I didn't get to show you that I'm kind of dying to show everyone.
Oh,
It's like there
okay.
was actually a moment where I was doing PSEP and I was like, wait a minute. This moment calls for something else. And I used this moment of AED of relationship
Mhm.
where I introduced it, right? And he was on cannabis. And of course, it broke something totally new open. And it was really, but I don't want to say the details because I don't want to kind of wreck it if I do get to show it one day. But I think it would be such a rich conversation to say, like, okay, when do you want to break that attunement very intentionally? And when do you want to use neuroplasticity and suggestibility to like drop some new seeds, like very healing seeds, very carefully chosen seeds, but like something new needs to come and it needs to kind of come from me. I realize that's a dangerous statement because
No, no, no. I hear
in
you. I
the hands of
hear.
ego, or if it's in the hands of, right, like someone, the
Yeah.
therapist being triggered or being misattuned, it could be risky.
Yeah. Um, I hear you, and I think there really is a place for it. My quick answer to that is, for example, if somebody doesn't have any kind of positive relational like transference, if somebody doesn't have any kind of positive relational history with that they can sort of put, like uh, positive transference into, right? They don't have those experiences. They didn't have a grandma, they didn't have an uncle, they didn't have somebody that they could really like look to and relate to as competent and nurturing. Then I think that, that's part of the protocol in PSIP, that we really do end up creating that. And so it is suggestibility. It is, you might even, I mean, do it very low key in a gentle way. Like you can say to somebody, I see you as good, right? And that's not something that's coming from them, and it may actually be, tumultuous in their system when you introduce that. But I think it's necessary to start to create that space within someone, because it's almost like you're saying somebody is so developmentally young that, you know, they never got that when they were developmentally young. And so they can't recreate it themselves.
Exactly. And we can't ask somebody to make something of nothing, right? So
Yeah,
if you're
that's
hanging
it.
out kind of in a void and, there's just not even like the state four void, but like more of a developmental void,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Where there's just never been any experience, relational experience of that sort.
Yeah.
I think we do have to co-create that, and we have to co-create it in a way that becomes experiential, right? Like it
Mhm.
works with it as an experience.
Well, I mean, and then if you think about the fact that, many people don't have any experience of, or very, very little experience of attunement, the fact that we're constantly attuning to them means that we're always generating that positive experience when they're on medicine. So at some level, probably not a foreground level, but a background level, they're probably internalizing that. So
Totally. And so can I give you just one
yeah,
line, you and
yeah.
everyone, a one-liner from AEDP that if anything, I think this will take things to a whole new level. After a PSIP session, just say, what was it like that we did that together?
Mhm.
And people will reflect on that attunement and they'll pay attention to it. And whatever little background effect that attunement was having back here will all of a sudden be foreground in their experience. And it'll
Ah,
probably be intimate and it'll probably be a little vulnerable for therapist and patient alike because you'll be talking about something happening in the room, but you'll be building out that network
yeah.
of this is what it means to be in an attuned relationship. And, we want that for people. Different, we don't want them to like go out and look for friends that are PSIP therapists, just to get that level of attunement all the time. But we want them to have an echo of that in their right? We want them to pursue relationships that are attuned, that are caring, that see them for who they are and accept them for who they are. So the more we're building that out, we're giving them that imprint of positive relating. So just that one little ADP phrase, what's it
I
like?
love it. I love it. I'm bringing it into my part A's now and see. I'll let you know. I'll let you know
Okay,
how the part
awesome.
A goes with that. Root accelerator. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you do, this is from Jen, do you do solution sessions? How does that fit into AEDP? I think most of AEDP is solution sessions, right?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
fair?
so. Like
Um,
whenever we're working in building the positive, or we're working in building out positive affect and being in positive affect and spiraling through it, those are all like building out, elaborating, expanding, creating more space for populating solution.
mhm. Agreed. Agreed. Okay. So let's leave that one there. All right, this is from Bella. I understand the AEDP work. So does the PSIP model come second? And does PSIP with a client like Kari's then go back in through a more biological way versus narrative? Let's just pause there and maybe talk about that because I thought you addressed this really beautifully when we were articulating the differences between the two models. And you were saying AEDP is more limbic model, referring more to affect, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
versus PSIP is a more brainstem level model, meaning that we're looking at biological responses that are taking place before perhaps even I'd say that it overlaps with emotions, but perhaps not nearly as much as what AEDP does. But something like dissociation, right? Real biological response. And certainly it lives below the level of identity,
Yeah.
right? I think that's fair to say.
That's
Uh,
why I think that there's such great complementarity in these models.
mhm,
Because again, we also can't do deep emotion work without it affecting the biology and the nervous system and the brainstem, right? So there's mutual influence there, but like where you're coming in and where you're putting most of your focus, like PSIP is such a nervous system, a nervous system clearing model, right? Like the states are nervous system states. It's so biological and so primal. And AEDP, I wouldn't say it's narrative. There's probably a little more narrative than in PSIP, but
mhm,
you're always looking for that emotional and experiential doorway to open and descend and go into, because you're looking for the emotion wave, right? Whatever that is, if it's rage, if it's grief, if it's fear, if it's joy, if it's love, if it's, feeling like you're being met for the first time, right? All these relational affects, you want to go into the experience. So that I think is more limbic,
yeah.
right? So we have this dance. I'm just gonna let my desperate dog out
Okay.
because
Yeah. Um,
All right, let's see if we can wrap this up in 5 minutes because I just heard my family come in and I
Okay,
think
let's
this
go to the
household's
last
about to
question
get
then.
rowdier.
Okay, last question. As it relates to the work with immobility, do you think he was having a trauma-related memory in that moment? Leave me alone, let me go, or strictly relating to the experience of immobility?
That's an interesting question. I read it as he was speaking to the immobility. He was that was the shift moment of him, moving from it being egosyntonic to ego dystonic, right? Like this is me and this is just normal and it's invisible and I just have to take it.
Yeah.
It's okay. To, this feels uncomfortable. I don't like this. I don't like not being able to move. Leave me alone. Go away.
Mhm.
But it was a little bit of a murky moment. I mean, that's where I feel like sometimes I'm tempted, and I'm sure a lot of people are tempted to kind of interrupt the PSIP process and be like, wait, what do you mean by that?
Can you
Are
clarify?
you,
Like,
yeah, like, are you having a memory right now? Like
uh,
that, like almost compulsion to fill in the
mhm.
story is really strong. And I think maybe if I hadn't set my mind at the beginning of that session to just try to do pure PSIP, I might have been more inclined to ask, like,
Mhm.
what's happening right here? Like, let's just pull out of it for a minute so I can get my bearings. But ultimately, I just kind of trusted the process and trusted that he was turning against something that he had been so aligned with his whole life out of necessity.
The intriguing thing is it might not matter.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe
So,
not.
like,
Let's
it
go
might,
with
I
that.
mean, I, I like your read of it. I would agree with your read of it. He was referring to the immobility as something that had become dystonic. Uh, but ultimately, right, it's the process is happening and it's happening in a system and we see the results, whether we understand it, whether we understand the context of these movement patterns or immobility patterns relatively it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I also want to bring the humility of, even if we're trying to work with direct experience very, um, very closely and very truly, we're always putting a story on it, right? Like PSIP is a story,
Mhm.
right? It's a story of 4 states of the nervous system. Like we can't escape our stories because our stories are our brains, our sense-making organ, right? And so I think as we're kind of experiential scientists that are doing our best to stay true to the emergent experience, but I also think it's only fair to recognize we're still putting a story
We're
on it.
still
Like our
putting, yeah.
models are stories. Like we can't get out of our stories. And I think that keeps me humble because
Mhm.
it just it keeps us just a little bit in doubt, right? And so I like questions like this that are like put a little of that margin of doubt in, like, wait, was that really what was happening? Because I think we have to
Uh-huh.
challenge ourselves and we have to challenge each other because they are all stories. And
Yeah.
if they're healing stories and they're stories that are staying really true to experience, we're probably better off than if they're like stories that are rooted in the soil of trauma and, right? Old,
Yeah.
outdated stories, laid down by other wounded people or, in the best case, or psychopaths in the worst case. Like those are some warped stories. Like we need to get people out of those stories. Like the
Right.
nervous system's story is a much more true story. We're all bound by stories in the end because we're bound by our own human brains and our own human experience.
Mhm. Ah, Gary, thank you.
Yeah,
Yay. Thank you
thank
for
you,
doing
Saj.
this, doing
So
these
much
two.
fun.
And I'm sure people will be very excited when you finally come on board as a full instructor and run trainings in Italy.
I'm
You'll have
excited to
to
do that.
go to,
Yes. Come to Tuscany,
yeah.
enjoy the beauty of Tuscany, with PSIP and with psychedelics. And it's going to be like, what better combination is there in life than that, right?
Mhm.
It'll
Yeah, it'll be good.
be good.
Okay. All right. Thank you again. And
Thank you.
I'll see you later.
All right. Bye, Saj.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.